I'm Johnny. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Johnny.
My sobriety date is May the 22nd of 2000, and I got sober at the age of 22. My father was a binge drinker, and my mother was a chronic alcoholic. She just drank all the time. I didn't really recognize a change in her behavior just because she stayed drunk all the time. My father, on the other hand, was what the big book describes as a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I hated my dad. He had a complete personality change whenever he drank. You know, I knew that it was because of drinking, and I hated what he did to my family, and I hated alcohol, and it was one thing that I was never going to do and I was never going to become. Around about the age of 10, my two older sisters and I were back in a bedroom, and we were crowded up in the corner, and we were crying, and you know, we could hear the goings on in the living room, and I thought, this is it. You know, I've had about enough. At the end of the hallway that was coming down from the den, there was a closet, and in that closet was a shotgun. And and I envisioned walking to the closet, getting that shotgun out, walking into the living room, looking at him right dead in his eyes, eyeball to eyeball, and just blowing his brains out. And I went to the closet to get the gun, and the gun wasn't there. My uncle's gun had gotten stolen, and he had borrowed my dad's gun to go hunting. So I truly believe that God did for us what we could not do for ourselves on that day, because I really intended on killing him. And I absolutely hated him, and I'm not blaming my alcoholism on my father. The point I'm trying to get at is just how much I hated him. If there was a deeper word for hate or resentment or loathe or anything like that that could describe how I felt. At the age of 20, I got drunk for the first time. By the time I was 21, I was on the nut ward of a mental institution. By the time I was 22, I was homeless on the streets of Memphis. While I was in the mental institution, my father that I hated, he ended up getting sober in Alcoholics Anonymous in 1996. And he came to see me every day. He said, "Son, one thing Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me is unconditional love, and I just want you to know that no matter who you are or what you do, your mother and I will be right beside you and will help you in any way that we can." My mother ended up getting sober 6 months after my father in 1997, and I just thought it was just a bunch of hogwash. So I ended up getting sober in May of 2000, and there was still just a real strained relationship with him. My forgiveness for my father had been like chiseling away at a statue or something like that. It wasn't anything that was just greatly removed all of a sudden. It was just one of those things that was chiseled away little by little. After I'd been sober about 7 years, about 2007, I ended up sponsoring this young man, and he had been raised in an alcoholic home, and we were going through the steps, and we were sitting in my living room one night, and he was talking about a lot of his feelings being raised by an alcoholic mother. And I remember thinking to myself and praying for God to give me the words to help this young man find forgiveness for his mother. I cried a little bit, and he cried a little bit. And about a week later, I went to a sober event, and I was coming home, and there was a song that was playing on a CD, and it had to do with forgiveness. And I just kept playing this song over and over again, and all of a sudden I could envision like my dad singing those words, like it was his story. And it was one of those things that logically and intellectually I could understand, but it was the first time that I could actually feel his story from his point of view. And all of a sudden I had to pull over on the side of the road because I was crying so bad. And it was just like these dammed up emotions just started coming out of me. And it was at that moment for the first time I had actually felt love from my father. And I found that through carrying the message to someone else. And that young man is no longer in AA today. And I thought that he had put me in that young man's life to help him, and I found out that God had other plans, and that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and I'm not necessarily the teacher. And that's it.